We are Anka. Stay tuned for updated real news.
Hello, Anka Daily News viewers. Today we bring you a development of the war that has been in the shadows but is gaining more and more attention. As we approach the third year of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the course of the war has begun to show changes not only on the front lines, but also in the morale of Russian soldiers and the realities on the ground. In this period of intense fighting on both sides, one thing is striking: the increase in the number of Russian soldiers surrendering. These events provide serious clues about the morale of the Russian army and the breaks in the chain of command. Recently, there has been a noticeable increase in the surrender rate of soldiers, especially those serving at the forward operation points of the Russian army. Unable to resist the rapidly advancing Ukrainian troops, many Russian soldiers are either retreating or surrendering. These developments show that Russia is facing deepening difficulties in its war strategies and is struggling to control the situation on the ground. In today's broadcast, we'll discuss the latest developments in the shadow of the disaster in the Kursk region of Russia. The increasing number of soldiers surrendered, especially in the areas where the Russian offensive continues, provides critical insight into what is changing in the course of the war. We'll analyze the experiences of the surrendered soldiers and their impact on the overall situation of the Russian army. Let's take a look together. Before moving on to our report, here's a small reminder. As the Anka Daily News team, we strive to bring you the developments in the Russia-Ukraine war. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our daily reports and explanations. We also read all the comments you leave on our videos. Please continue to share your ideas about our content in the comment section. Tell us what content you'd like to see on the Anka Daily News channel. Let's start if you're ready. Anka Daily News reports. In one of the most critical moments of the war, the 425th Assault Battalion Skala of the Ukrainian Army's Eastern Operations Command achieved a strategic victory in the town of New York in the Donetsk region. The bold move by a small team of just 8 Ukrainian soldiers resulted in the capture of 16 soldiers from Russia's 9th Separate Guards Motorized Rifle Brigade. This brigade consisted of a unit known as the so-called People's Militia of the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic. The captured Russian lieutenant Vladislav Akimov testified after his capture that their mission was to cross a strategic intersection guarded by Ukrainian machine guns. However, this mission turned out to be a disaster for their first group. While the first group suffered heavy losses under intense Ukrainian fire, the second group managed to take refuge in a 16-story grain elevator. However, this move was not enough to save them. Their hopes that they would receive reinforcements from the Russian military command were soon dashed. In just a day and a half, attacks by Ukrainian forces using drones and heavy machinery completely pinned down the Russian troops. During this time, Russian troops had to wait, trapped under constant attacks and difficult conditions. The attacks, especially with the support of heavy-lift drones and the M2 Bradley infantry fighting vehicle, gave the Ukrainian forces a great advantage. The commander of the Russian assault group, Vladimir Gribov, who was seriously wounded in the fighting and lost his leg, said they were abandoned by their own command. Nevertheless, he said Ukrainian soldiers tried to keep him alive and expressed how complicated the situation was from their point of view. Gribov's testimony shed light on the demoralization of the Russian military on the ground and the human dissemination of the war. The Ukrainian soldiers who helped him, as an example of the contradictions on the ground, once again illustrated the brutal face of war. The turning point of the war came when Ukrainian forces, backed by tanks and infantry fighting vehicles, attacked the grain elevator. During this brief but intense firefight, a brave Ukrainian soldier, codenamed Black, convinced a Russian soldier hiding in the grain elevator to surrender. Notably, this soldier not only surrendered himself but also convinced his comrades to surrender. This once again demonstrated the disciplined and strategic war management of the Ukrainian forces. However, the 3 Russian soldiers who did not surrender tried to resist. 2 of them were killed by Ukrainian tank fire, while the 3rd was shot dead at the entrance to a grain elevator. This was one of the clearest examples of how brutal and tragic the war had become. This incident in the town of New York demonstrates that Ukraine has not only achieved tactical success on the battlefield, but also psychological superiority. The fact that a small Ukrainian unit captured a large and more powerful Russian unit shows the difficulties the Russian army faces on the ground and how far Ukraine has come in its war strategies. This operation proved that the Ukrainian army is successful not only in weaponry but also in psychological warfare. The increase in the surrender rate of Russian soldiers is considered as another indicator of Ukraine's reliance and superiority on the battlefield. Especially the recent loss of morale, logistical problems, and disconnections in the chain of command of the Russian army show how determined Ukraine is to win this war. This operation in Donetsk will not only be a strategic victory for the Ukrainian army, but also a turning point for Russia. Since the beginning of the war, Ukraine has been notable for its persistent resistance and successful operations, although such incidents once again highlight the harsh realities of war. The determination of the Ukrainian army gives hope for the future course of the war. This success in the Donetsk region could be a harbinger of even greater victories for Ukraine. The Russian army is trying to make new moves at every opportunity to make us forget the disaster in Kursk. But none of these attempts can change the realities on the ground. The Kursk disaster remains a deep wound for Russia, both strategically and psychologically. At this stage of the war, the morale of Russian troops is declining day by day, and the disappointments on the fronts are becoming more and more evident. In the aftermath of the disaster at Kursk, the Russian military has tried to take various strategic steps to cover up its failure on the ground and boost the morale of its troops. However, these efforts have done little to alleviate the difficulties the Russian military faces on the ground. As Russian troops retreat in the face of Ukraine's advances, the devastating effects of the war are taking their toll, and the increasing rate of surrender is a clear indication of the seriousness of the situation the army is facing. The growing weariness among the soldiers further weakens the resistance in the field. One of the biggest problems in the Russian army is the lack of adequate logistical support for frontline troops. Although many Russian soldiers serving in the Kursk region and other hot conflict areas are constantly asking for reinforcements and ammunition, these requests go unanswered. This not only negatively affects the morale of the soldiers on the front line, but also makes it impossible for them to fight effectively on the ground. As in the Kursk disaster, Russian soldiers in the field are exposed to intense attacks by the Ukrainian army because they are waiting for help and not receiving it. What do you think? Do you think the Russian army will continue to fail in Donetsk? What will this failure lead to? Let us know in the comments. We read and care about your opinions.